The final trip home for 47 crewmen of the battleship Iowa. Casualties of a peacetime disaster at sea. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Bodies of the U.S. sailors who died aboard the battleship Iowa were flown to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware today, and the Navy began an official full-scale investigation of the gun turret explosion that killed them during a routine exercise off Puerto Rico. A moratorium was ordered today on any further firing of guns similar to the one involved. President Bush defended Iowa-class battleships against charges that they are obsolete and dangerous. Our coverage begins with CBS newsman Ron Allen at the Pentagon.
As the USS Iowa sailed homeward today, the Navy silenced the huge 16-inch guns aboard all Navy battleships until the investigation of the tragic accident is completed. Sources close to the investigation have told CBS News that human error is high on the list of possible causes for the explosion in a gun turret that killed 47 crewmen. But the Navy still doesn't know exactly what happened.
How could an explosion happen in there?
We simply don't know.
Investigators do know the gun that exploded on Turret 2 had not been fired before the accident. The bags of black powder and the huge projectiles had been loaded into position. There is now speculation that the breech mechanism, which seals the back end of the barrel, may have malfunctioned and not closed properly for firing. Navy officials have said initial reports from the ship indicate the explosion happened in the gun room on the top level of the turret.
There could well have been a failure of the breaching mechanism, which would have allowed the explosion to back up into the gun turret, which caused a catastrophic destruction.
The fact the gun had not fired earlier appears to eliminate the possibility that gases or hot debris had built up in the barrel and caused the explosion. The Navy has used this same technology since World War II. President Bush participated when a modernized Iowa was recommissioned in 1984. But the original guns are still intact. Even the gunpowder used was made in the 1950s, which leaves the question, should these battleships be retired?
I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that because that kind of powder is put into these turrets in that way, that obsoletes, that makes a useful platform obsolete.
It doesn't have to be retired. It's not a wounded ship.
The ship was modernized at a cost of some $400 million. It is armed with the Navy's most powerful guns. Officials insist there is no better cost-effective way to deploy that much firepower. A team of Navy investigators is aboard the Iowa as it steams home to Norfolk. Officials now seem to have a better idea of the sequence of events leading up to the deadly explosion and where it happened, but not why. Dan?
Thank you, Ron. As relatives of the Iowa crew waited anxiously today to hear the fate of loved ones, remains of the dead were being removed from the battleship. CBS News correspondent Juan Vasquez was on the scene.
Helicopters ferried the victims off the USS Iowa today as the wounded battleship lay at anchor 15 miles off the coast of Puerto Rico. Signs of the powerful blast that rocked the ship were easy to see. Gun number 2 was down. A scorched hole marred the area beneath the turret. The commander of the Second Fleet was on the bridge to observe the gunnery exercise when the ship's captain gave the order to load gun number 2.
During that process, for some unexplained reason, there was a tremendous explosion and fire, and it was instantaneous.
All 47 sailors in the immediate area are dead or missing. 11 others on the lower level of the turret escaped without major injuries.
During the fighting, the ship's crew performed magnificently. They were on the fires quickly and fought heroically to get to their fallen shipmates.
The Navy here is calling the tragedy aboard the battleship Iowa an unexplained accident, and an investigative team is already aboard the ship to determine exactly what went wrong. The bodies of the sailors were carried to a waiting transport plane at Roosevelt Roads Naval Station on the eastern tip of Puerto Rico. Naval historians say it's been more than 40 years since a U.S. battleship experienced an explosion in a gun turret. By late afternoon, the Iowa was sailing toward its home port in Virginia, while the victims of one of the greatest peacetime tragedies in recent naval history began the long journey home. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Roosevelt Roads Naval Station, Puerto Rico.
It was the most somber of homecomings, an all too familiar scene played out again as the bodies of the victims of the disaster aboard the battleship Iowa came home.
It is our prayer today that they will go from here to their resting places, certain in the knowledge that a grateful nation will not forget.
This military cemetery just across the water from the Iowa's home port of Norfolk is filled with sailors who died during war. Somehow, for the families of this old Navy town, casualties in peacetime are even harder to accept. Senior chaplain Doug Palmer oversaw the painful task of breaking the news to the victims' relatives.
To sit down with them, put your arm around them, and to drop the bomb. There's no other way. It's the hardest thing we do.
Seaman recruit Ray Bradshaw was a high school track star before joining the Navy last July. His family was told he was missing and presumed dead.
I was just hoping that it's a mistake, and that if it's not, you know, God will just have to make me strong enough to, he'll make me strong enough to bear it. But I'm hoping that it's just a mistake.
The battleship Iowa was his first shipboard assignment.
That ship to him was like nothing else in the world. He just loved it.
Tung Tan Adams was one of Ray Bradshaw's shipmates. He also died. His father, Alvin, wishes the Iowa had never sailed.
I just hope that such a thing will not happen again, and that in time there will be no need to have battle cruisers and battleships such as we have today.
But not all the chaplain's calls brought bad news.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Okay. Bye-bye.
The Navy likes to think of itself as a family, and today, the flags of the Iowa's sister ships in the Second Fleet were lowered in mournful memory. Terrence Smith, CBS News, Norfolk, Virginia.
And still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News. Leslie Stahl on the return of the Iran-Contra issue to the White House. And Deborah Potter on a new government warning about dangerous radon in the schools. Bush today again defended his role in the Weapons for Iran, Where Did the Money Go case, apparent contradictions in what he has said and his refusal to talk anymore about it. New questions have been raised about the extent of Mr. Bush's involvement. White House correspondent Leslie Stahl has the details.
President Bush says he stands by his denials of any wrongdoing in the Iran-Contra scandal, even though documents released at the Oliver North trial indicate he had a direct role in a secret deal to help the Contras.
And I might have something to say on it when the trial is over. To put it this way, my conscience is clear.
White House officials now concede the president was wrong 2 weeks ago when he claimed the new trial documents had been reviewed by the Iran-Contra congressional committees. But Mr. Bush balks at the idea of a cover-up.
But I have no reason to believe that the previous administration, the lawyers in it who worked closely with Congress, did not fulfill their obligations.
But Congress wants to investigate whether the documents were deliberately withheld.
And I will take this opportunity to tell them we'll cooperate fully.
I'm very pleased at the president's offer of cooperation. Unfortunately, and that's identical to the pledge we get from the previous president. And the question now is, was there in fact such cooperation?
The documents the committee never saw indicate that Mr. Bush promised Honduras U.S. aid in exchange for assistance to the Contras. In a March '87 letter to the Iran-Contra committees, the Reagan White House promised to produce any documents revealing, quote, any efforts to support or coordinate the provision of military assistance to the anti-Sandinista forces. White House officials now suggest that FBI agents charged with screening the evidence could have inadvertently missed the documents about Mr. Bush.
And either the agents looked at the documents and thought they were about a trip to Honduras that wasn't relevant, or they missed that file.
But the committee counsel says it wasn't the FBI's responsibility.
We dealt with the White House only, and it was the White House's obligation to search and produce.
Late today, a White House spokesman said, no one is looking over the documents. We will not investigate ourselves. We have no role in this. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
Jurors in the Oliver North Iran-Contra trial are sequestered for the night. Tomorrow, they begin weighing a dozen criminal charges against North, including lying to Congress and destroying evidence. The panel of 9 women and 3 men got final instructions today that went to the heart of North's defense. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver has our report.
Oliver North has always maintained that he acted under orders of his superiors, including President Reagan and former National Security Council chiefs Robert McFarlane and John Poindexter, and the late CIA Director William Casey. Today, Judge Gerhard Gesell said the jurors can consider that defense, but only in a very limited way. If they believe North was specifically ordered and directed by a superior to act contrary to the law, and if no alternative was available to him, they can consider the defense. But the judge also said that the order must be specific, not general or vague. And although North himself testified that he was ordered to lie to Congress and destroy documents, other witnesses have disputed that. The question of intent is another paramount issue in Oliver North's defense. He insists that he never knowingly broke the law. But the judge said that for only one count, destroying of official documents, does it matter whether North knew he was breaking the law? He said that for 7 other counts, including obstructing government officials and taking illegal funds, it doesn't matter if North knew he was acting illegally. The question is whether he had a bad motive. And for 4 counts of lying to Congress and the Attorney General, the judge said that motive doesn't matter at all. To convict North, the jury must decide only that he lied on purpose. Proceedings were delayed a while today as the defense asked for a mistrial because of news reports that some of the jurors had incorrectly filled out their original questionnaires. The judge denied that motion, and deliberations will begin tomorrow. Rita Braver, CBS News at the federal courthouse in Washington.
A Census Bureau report out tonight says the number of Americans holding government jobs has hit a record high, 17.3 million. The fastest growing area of public employment, prisons and jails. Trapped indoors, it can cause cancer. Scientists last fall urged all homeowners to conduct radon tests after unhealthy levels of the gas were found in a sample of homes tested. Now, researchers say radon poses a particular threat to the nation's school children. Deborah Potter reports.
According to a new study, millions of American children may be exposed to hazardous levels of radon gas in their classrooms. Today, the government urged schools across the country to test for radon, the second leading cause of death from lung cancer.
The research we're aware of suggests that the threat to children, the risk to children, is disproportionately higher even than it is to adults.
Preliminary results from 16 states found that in more than half the schools tested, at least one classroom had dangerous levels of radon, the equivalent of smoking 10 cigarettes a day.
When you think how long a kid spends in the school, it could have an effect on his life.
We don't want to expose ourselves or the kids to anything harmful, so first time I've heard of radon in the schools, but I'm glad they're testing it.
Despite the potential danger to kids now in school, the government says that testing should wait until fall because results are more accurate in cool weather when windows are closed. The test itself is simple, and if a problem is found, it can be fixed by sealing foundations and adding ventilation. But the government will not pick up the tab. Local school systems will have to pay. And health officials in some states say the government's call for full-scale testing just isn't necessary.
I think, unfortunately, that it's going to create some unfounded fear and anxiety in the country, certainly in places like California where radon is not a major public health concern.
But government officials say the radon threat is real, and because children are involved, it ought to be taken seriously. Deborah Potter, CBS News, Washington.
The Soviet Union said today it has given up plans to build 2 more nuclear reactors at the Chernobyl power station. It also said that for safety reasons, it will not build any more reactors with the same type of graphite core. The announcement came 6 days before the 3rd anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. The UN General Assembly today voted to condemn Israel for its actions against Arab protesters in the occupied territories. The resolution asked the Security Council to consider measures to protect Palestinian civilians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. The vote was 129 to 2. Israel and the United States opposed. Jersey authorities said former Major League Baseball player Dale Berra was arrested today and charged with buying drugs from a major cocaine ring. The 32-year-old Berra, who played infield with the Pittsburgh Pirates and New York Yankees, testified in the 1985 trial of a man charged with supplying Pirate players with cocaine. Dale Berra is the son of baseball legend Yogi Berra. And of course, these are also troubled times for another baseball legend, Cincinnati's Pete Rose. Frank Courier has the latest on that.
Pete Rose came home today from a 10-day road trip, his life on hold, rocked by scandal, as baseball's investigation of illegal gambling drags on in secrecy.
We can stand here all day. I'm not going to make any comments on the matter of Pete Rose.
The 8-week-old inquiry focuses on whether Rose ever bet on baseball or even on his own team. With the IRS poring over his tax returns and racetrack winnings, a former teammate compares Rose to a dog that's been beaten up till it crawls under the porch.
You keep hounding me. You follow me to the parking lot, you follow me to the hotel, you follow me in a room, and it's no fun for me.
Or for this man. Baseball investigators will have to wait to talk with Tommy Giosa, a former Rose friend and key figure in the gambling probe, who was arraigned this week on drug and tax charges.
Mr. Giosa won't be speaking with anyone until the criminal charges against him have been resolved.
As new allegations surface almost every day, a CBS News New York Times poll shows Americans almost evenly split in their opinion of the Cincinnati Reds manager, with 60% undecided. Half of those surveyed believe baseball players routinely bet on their own sport, and the vast majority think it's wrong for a player to bet on his own club. Longtime friend Buzzy Bavasi, who heads the Hall of Fame Veterans Committee, says Rose should resign for the good of the team.
If he steps down, I don't see how baseball can punish him. Suppose he had bet on the baseball game. What's baseball going to do about it? They can't fine him, number one. They can't suspend him, number two. He's already out of the game.
But artist Gene Locklear, a former Reds teammate and Rose family friend, disagrees.
If he's innocent, he should stay there. Because automatically, I think the public, if he steps down, is going to say, well, he must be guilty.
With no hint as to when the betting probe will end, Rose keeps repeating he is not guilty and not worried. Not about the investigation, and least of all, not about his Reds, who are now 8-6 for the season, just a half game out of first place. Frank Courier, CBS News, Cincinnati.
Feeding time at the zoo today featured the first meal for Mandan, the only second California condor hatched from an egg conceived in captivity. The chick emerged from its shell yesterday at the San Diego Wild Animal Park. After a few more days of feeding by hand, Mandan will begin getting its food from a handheld puppet that resembles an adult condor. 3 other fertile condor eggs are due to hatch in San Diego within the next 2 months. In the Brazilian jungle near the equator, an ancient story is being played out. Some see it as an adventure story, others as a tragedy. The ingredients are earth, gold, and greed. Richard Roth is our narrator.
It's become an aerial stampede in the Amazon jungle to places so small or so remote most outsiders have never heard of them. A landing strip's been cut through the rainforest near this place called Papayu. And though the government says the region near Brazil's border with Venezuela is officially off limits, it's turned into a base camp for fortune seekers. The men are miners, entrepreneurs and their hired hands who are part of what could become the biggest gold rush in history. A wildcatting venture for wealth from the soil that's threatening a primitive culture and a primal environment. To extract the gold mixed in sand and gravel, miners are literally washing away the earth, and they're doing it at a furious pace. It's terrible here, but we do it for the money, he says. If it were not for the money, we would not be here. There were 3,000 men working pits like this 4 years ago. Today, an estimated 45,000. Laborers earning 6 times what they could in the cities. Barely half a ton of gold was sifted from the soil here 2 years ago. The take last year estimated at almost 4 tons.
The mining interests in Amazonia are now one of the major threats to the environment. Each year now in Brazil, an area the size of West Virginia, and the state of Maryland is being cut down. It has to be stopped. If it's not stopped very soon, we're going to lose Amazonia.
It's not just the land that's being eroded. For nearly 200,000 Amazon Indians, the richness of the rainforest is the simple sustenance it provides, food and shelter and a basic way of life. Modern encroachment comes at the expense of the Indians' welfare or their lives. Before there was an airstrip at Papayú, the Yanomami Indians were among the most isolated people on Earth. The discovery of gold has made them onlookers to a scramble for wealth, a stake of their own hard to get, even a fee for landing rights. Planes land here and they have to pay, says an Indian named Jom. They're supposed to pay, but they don't do anything. With his own small fleet of airplanes and helicopters, Vibaldo Barros sees it differently. We try to do whatever we can for them. We always help them. Before the miners came, the Indians lived like savages. Now they have comforts. But the Indians also have new diseases that gold miners from urban centers have brought into the jungle. Mercury used in the mining process is poisoning their water, killing fish. Most of the Yanomami have been turned into barterers or beggars. And it seems unstoppable. Gold fever has become an Amazon epidemic. Boa Vista is just one small gold trading city. The amount of gold that's sold here is enormous, says Eden, a mine owner. The smallest shop buys 3 kilos of gold daily, and there are 300 shops. The freelance mining of the jungle has made Brazil the world's 5th largest gold producer. The government estimating more than $1 billion worth just last year. But the price of gold in this part of the Amazon includes the cost of the rainforest being swept aside and a culture with it. Richard Roth, CBS News, New York.
And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. We hope you'll stay tuned now for 48 Hours on drugs in the workplace. That's coming up soon at 8, 7 Central Time tonight. Dan Rather, see you then.
Working high, drugs on the job, companies crack down, and it's war in the workplace. 48 Hours tonight.
This is CBS.